to truly believe in the magic.
How's it going, Magic fans? It is the 20th of March. We are recording again. I'm joined by the Wizard of the Valleys, Mr. G. Jones. How are we doing tonight, sir?
I'm okay, mate. Sun is shining, which is probably the first time this year, really. It's been a bit drab all year, hasn't it? So, yeah, weather's looking up. Weekend is upon us. We got some magic games on this weekend. 11 o'clock starts, which is it's quite nice at the moment, isn't it? I mean, you and I know Paul as well, and a lot of the Magic UK community. We're getting to watch, sometimes at least the first half, before watching the rest of the games the following day. So, no, I'm good, thank you, mate. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Obviously, it would have been better if we weren't riding on a 3-game losing streak right now. So we had the highs, as Magic fans will know. We like to be taken up really high, and we had the 7-game winning streak, which came crashing down in Atlanta. We've obviously had I thought, a decent showing against the NBA champions Thunder. And then we really got, in the words of Barack Obama, a bit of a shellacking in Charlotte, 130 to 111 last night. So I was hoping to be recording totally positive. We're back doing a job in Charlotte. Obviously a big game given their place in the standings, but it was kind of a bit of a drab start to the day, G.
That's what it's like being a Magic basketball fan, isn't it? Never get too high, never get too low. Just because this time last week, we were on that 7-game win streak, like you said, and the world was a wonderful place. I mean, it's not a bad place at the moment. We're still in the mix.
Depends where you are, to be honest.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's tricky. But no, we're in the mix. We're in with a shout. And all we got to do is just focus on the remaining 13 or so games that we've got left. So, yeah.
So if you're looking at that, G, you're always positives. What's the glass half full take on this recent stretch? We've had the 7-game win streak. We've had the 3-game losing streak. What's gone well from this for you?
So there was 7 games, absolutely some superb wins in there. A couple against Minnesota, Milwaukee on the road. We really beat them up quite badly. We also had we had a win against Miami, but with the season in total, there's 5 there, with the play-in game included. And if you look back into the preseason, you make that 7. And then if you want to look at some of the players, Paolo obviously has really become a bit of a leader in terms of everything since the All-Star break, averaging 25 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and while shooting 51% of the floor. He's really come on where everybody was sort of calling him out and saying he's had a disappointing season. Is it Franz's team? Is it Paolo's team? We've really sort of found Paolo to become, the man, and putting the team on his back. What do you think about Bane, Gar?
I think Bane is as advertised. I think when you look at what we've got from him, I know there would have been talk of, it's been a slow start to the season for Des Bane, but I think he's coming into a new system, veteran player, kind of. But what we've got out of Desmond Bane in the, certainly post All-Star break, I thought he did well before that. I thought coming into a new team, he performed pretty well. He was pretty steady, but he's stepped it up massively. Shooting percentages are through the roof. He's basically doing the usual Desmond Bane 3-point shooting, and that's with a couple of lean games in there as well. He had a couple of games where he wasn't that great from 3. But overall, when you look at it, him and Paolo, I believe, are the second biggest scoring duo in the league. And we needed that step up because if we had to stay relevant, we're trying to replace a 20 points per game Swiss Army knife in Franz Wagner for an extended period. The 2 highest paid players then are Paolo and Des Bane, and they had to go out there and kind of lead the team, and I felt they both have. I've really enjoyed Des Bane in an Orlando Magic jersey. I think I've got no complaints about his spirit. I think, took a little bit of that silly edge off that he had earlier in the season.
Yeah.
But he's been, what I expected. I expected to get a 20 points per game, very good elite 3-point shooter who, again, can handle the ball a little bit when actually asked to. And with the system the Magic play, that's not always with a pure point guard on the floor, and there's that sharing of duties. So I've been massively impressed by Des Bane in that streak, and I know you're a big fan of Tristan Da Silva, G.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, my opinion was he'd had quite a lean spot where he'd kind of tailed off a little bit, perhaps due to injury. But again, Tristan Da Silva, you've got to give him his plaudits. He's stepped up and he's been a solid starter in that run. And I think we can all agree Stan Van Gundy was building him a small statue out the front of the arena. And I still say Stan Van Gundy's probably our best ever coach. So if Stan Van Gundy likes him, he's got the big seal of approval from me there.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to touch upon, Tristan's output in that 7-game win streak, there was a back-to-back night against the Cavaliers and the Wizards where he scored 26 and 23 respectively. But I think his defense has really stepped up. A couple of times he's been defending, decent players on the other end. He's been getting his hands in the way. He's been getting blocks, contesting, and his rebounding's also. He's in one of my sort of fantasy teams, so I really keep an eye on his stats, and he's helping me a little bit. So, just going back as well to Bane, Gar. And you said you liked him. Do you remember a guy called John Weisbrod? Was it Weisbrod?
Yeah.
2004. He was in charge of the Magic, and he was a hockey guy, and he really wanted to instill this culture of stepping up and looking after your own. And was he the one who put the C on the jersey for T-Mac?
He was the guy who was when T-Mac decided that he was going to go, he wanted to go in for Steve Francis because he would have seen his Steve Francis's attitude when we've been playing against the Rockets, I believe.
Yeah, so he reminds me of that Weisbrod, however you say it's, year, even though it was only for a year, and then he went back into hockey, didn't he? The other person I wanted to touch upon, Gary, and I'm sure you'll agree, is Javon Carter.
Yeah, go. Do you want to go for it, or me, or whatever?
I mean, I'll just say a little spot, but he's been absolutely superb. Everything we need in a backup point guard, what we were expecting to get from Tyus Jones. Hard-nosed, he spreads the floor. Defenders have got to respect his shot. Now, whilst he's not been shooting it as well as we probably expect, he's only shooting 33%, but defenses are having to keep an eye on him. He's hit a couple of big shots, and he's still making 2 3-point field goals a game, which is obviously massive for us in terms of spreading the floor. I've just been really impressed with him and that pickup from management after the trade deadline happened, where we were a little bit down upon not getting some players or obviously getting something for Tyus Jones.
I think, firstly, G, what you said, I think Des Bane's a bit of a better basketball player than John Weisbrod.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to do that comparison, but no, I get what you're saying. He kind of fit that hockey guy mentality. I understand where you're coming from with that. Javon Carter, I feel as though when he's came into Magic, he's brought accountability back into the locker room. I don't know whether that's the case. I don't know, because we're not in the locker room, but it feels as though he's the veteran voice. He's played on a winner. He's played on the Milwaukee Bucks. I'd seen him a little bit in that run because I do like Giannis as a player, so I'd kept an eye on when they'd been playing a little bit, so I wasn't totally unfamiliar with him. I'd seen him as hard-nosed and a guy who plays hard, a little bit undersized, but yeah, he's done everything we could have hoped for, and he's one of those pickups where you just don't expect it. The Magic have got a little bit of a history where Mo Wagner, Goga, etc., where they've just kind of been pulled out of nowhere, and they're the guys that's tended to produce. And yeah, I've enjoyed watching him play, actually. Definitely like that. Obviously, G, we've talked about the glass half full. There is the other view where it's the sky is falling and the world's ending, and we've had 3 big losses recently. I think when you look at it, the OKC game, we did okay there, actually. But the games that were either side of that against the Atlanta Hawks and the Charlotte Hornets were very, very disappointing. So I've got a couple of takeaways for that, and then I'm going to say over to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Crack on.
The Hawks game for me was a worry because I did think we were going into a hard matchup given what we've seen earlier in the year. And when we went in, I just watched that game and I felt as though we got dominated. I feel as though the Hawks team minus Trae Young is a lot better. I think they've a bit like the Knicks, and I'm not saying that they copied the Magic because the Magic aren't a winner, but I can see shades of what's being done there where it's like the Knicks, we kind of had their card for a while and then they went out and they got Bridges and they got OG and they became more defense orientated, bigger, etc. And I feel the Hawks have done that with their build where it's kind of keys over to Jalen Johnson, who is absolutely brilliant, by the way. And then their backcourt is long, it's rangy, they play physical. And when you look at that game, for me, it was won and lost on the boards, on the rebounds. We had 40 rebounds, 10 of them were from Paolo. And I know when we've talked about Paolo's development since we drafted him, I've always been had like a little bit more rebounding from it, and he stepped that up. But then you're looking and you've got Wendell with 3 rebounds in that game.
Nice.
Atlanta, 54 rebounds. And of that, you've got Jalen Johnson, 15, Dyson Daniels, 12, Jonathan Kuminga, 8. That's just 3 players. And I felt the entire game when I was watching that, it was like key rebound Atlanta, key rebound Atlanta. Every time they just grabbed rebounds whenever they wanted. And I felt we got really taught a bit of a lesson there. And I think that's important because it could be us or them heading into a tiebreaker on the plane, and they've got it now. The Charlotte Hornets are just a complete outlier, and I know I've mentioned on here before about like an eye on Charlotte and what they're doing, but their build's exciting. It's different. They've smashed draft picks. They've seemingly came out of nowhere because they've always been that like losing type franchise where it's like, oh, what's going on in Charlotte? It's a bit of a mess. And then all of a sudden you're looking at them now and they've absolutely killed us from 3, from behind the 3-point line. They had 48%. They had 28 of 46 threes. And it's just whenever that ball goes out of the perimeter, they look as though they could destroy teams. But also what's interesting is they've got the size. They've got some big players. So like LaMelo Ball, huge guard. But on the inside, they're starting to get physical players there as well. They've brought Kobe White in who can light it up. And I'm not saying they're the Golden State Warriors, but I think they've gone for like a bigger and longer Golden State model to build around with the players they've got there. Quite worrying. We got out rebounded again, 31-41. And then in the last 5 games, I think, and as much as I like Jalen Suggs as a defender and as a competitor and as the heart and soul of the Magic, we have been torched twice by like opposition players who are on the perimeter. So if you have a look at the performances of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which no one can stop him really. And then on the other end of the floor, when you're looking at shooting wars, Jalen Suggs' last 5 games, in those you've got a 20% from 3, a 22% from 3, and a 0 and 5, 0% from 3. And our shooting from Jalen and what he does can make or break Orlando, because we know what we're going to get from Des Bane, and Tristan Da Silva's kind of stepped it up. So I think that's been some worrying takeaways if I was to flip it a little bit, G. So I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
That's fair. No. I agree with most of what you say there. In terms of those games, though, I think we've got to tip our hat to those opponents. Definitely. Atlanta, you've said they're on a tear, 11 straight, although some of those wins were against lesser opposition, perhaps. That's probably fair to say. But you can only beat who's in front of you. You mentioned upon the rebounding, but something I think that's really hurt us this season, and somewhere the Magic have really struggled, is the bench productivity. You think back to a couple of seasons ago when you had your Joe Ingles, you had your Mo Wagner, and that pick and roll, you could just play that all day long, sit Cole Anthony out in the corner, etc., and you'd get decent output from your offense from the bench. Stick one of the starters still in there as a decoy, etc., and our bench was pretty damn good in fairness, and they would normally outscore the opposition's defense. Now this season, I don't know what's happened. We obviously wanted to bring Trey Jones in. Trey Jones? Tyus Jones.
Yeah.
So many Joneses in the league.
Way too many Joneses.
Way too many Joneses. And we've just struggled. It's just not been there. And that's one part of the team they really need to improve upon this off season. I think real struggle. Obviously, injuries haven't been kind to us, and if you were to bring Franz back and bring Anthony Black back, Jonathan Isaac as well, that's something we need to touch upon in a second. You've got a lot more depth there, and it's just felt these last 3 games against OKC, Atlanta, and Charlotte that they've had the depth. Whilst we competed with OKC, and we spoke about this off air with Drum and you and I beforehand, it was a good game. We competed, we matched them. Unfortunately, they just went up a gear right at the depth because they had those players that they could rely upon, and I can't see anybody coming close to them. So much so, I'm going to put a bet on OKC to win it this season. I cannot see anybody stopping them unless, something almighty happens in terms of injuries.
I think San Antonio might give them a run.
They may do, yeah. They may do. But everyone on Oklahoma, they know their roles. And this is something we had with the Magic a couple of seasons ago. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do. You've got guys there like Caruso, you've got Dort, defenders, antagonists, people who just stick their nose in places just to disrupt the rhythm. You've got the bigs, you've got Hartenstein, you've got Chet. They just seem to have everyone ready, in place for any situation. And then obviously you've got Shea bringing it all together. I think they're an absolutely exceptional team. I didn't expect to win. I was very happy with the effort put forward. But then, obviously, the other 2 games, a little bit disappointing. Felt like we ran out of steam. I was speaking to Paul when we were watching the Atlanta game, and the body language wasn't good. First 5-6 minutes, we could see that the team was looking a bit leggy, I want to say. But then, that's the glass half empty side of it, isn't it? I did like to see what Coach Mose did yesterday with Scott Foster and some of the officiating. I thought the officiating was quite one-sided yesterday. It felt like after Jalen Suggs had his bit of a moment with Scott Foster, it was decided, Charlotte's going to win this. And I didn't think we got a call then until we were down 20 points. And Tom Sohn also agreed with that in the WhatsApp group whilst we were watching it. But, tip your hat to them. Unlike the Miami Heat community, a little bit not graceful in defeat. We'll be graceful, shall we, Kat?
I think we should.
Yeah, and well done to all those teams. But big 13 games ahead of us now to obviously see where we sit in the standings at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to have a little bit of a chat about that as we delve into the mailbag in a moment, G. But before we get to talking about the rest of the season, the first question in our mailbag comes from Stephen Cameron, Magic HQ. By the way, that's a really great Twitter or X follow for anyone who isn't following Stephen, who is Stephen Magic HQ on Twitter. He's in Oakland, in California, so he's not in Orlando. But it's, I think, more one for you to answer than me, G. When it comes to the playoffs this year, Stephen asks, or next, as someone who lives far away, what is your strategy for travelling to see the team play? Do you buy tickets for round 1, or are you assuming and risking that the team will make round 2 and then you book for that? What's your thoughts?
Well, funny, Stephen and I were conversing a couple of weeks ago, and I messaged him and I said, are you coming for the playoffs? Because obviously I was planning potentially to go, and we were both of the same opinion. We weren't sure. Maybe save our money for next year, seeing as, how the season's shaking out, and obviously where the Magic might seed. So in terms of how I look at it, obviously, going to the playoffs, the atmosphere is absolutely second to none. We've done it in the past, and it's a real step up from a regular season game. Now, the only caveat with that is you don't know when the games are going to fall. And we're not going to know when the games are going to fall until up to the week before, perhaps, or the Magic might not even make it. In the worst situation, we get into the play-in, and, don't want to say it, but if we lost twice, then that's it, curtains. Yep. So in terms of the way I'm looking at it, you've almost got to work out your expectation of the Magic. Are we going to make round 2? Or are we going to make round 1? If I want a playoff series, I say series, it'll probably be 2 games. It'll be games, 1, 2, or 3 and 4. Because we can't afford to take that much time off work and fly halfway across the world, to stay for 2 weeks for what potentially might be 3 games or 4 games in a series. So the way I look at it, you go for games 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 in this year. With the way we're playing, I'm targeting round 1. So obviously, and I was actually speaking to Paul about this, about what dates they may be. And in fairness, Paul did a lot of research and came back with, if it's games 3 and 4, if we were to travel on the 21st of April, we should be in town for games 3 and 4. It might happen any time after that. But obviously, you're going to have to scramble. And it's in and around Easter time. So anyone in the UK now, flights are obviously generally more expensive. You've got what's going on in, Iran. That's going to affect prices of fuel and everything. So that's going to drive it up, something I didn't really consider until early part of this week. And it's a big scramble to get your flights, your accommodation, and most importantly, your Magic tickets. So it's one of those. Do I wait till next year? I've been given a pass. So am I better off waiting, or do I just seize the moment and just, enjoy life to the fullest and hope for a couple of Magic W's? How do you see it, Gar?
This year, I'd probably be looking at the first round.
Yeah.
I think that's where I would be looking at. Not saying we couldn't go to the second round, but I think I'd be looking at round 1.
Yeah.
So yeah, but a good friend of Mr. Bacon is our South American friend Raul Bacor, and he's Raul Bacor has asked, what order do we have 1 to 10 for the East, and what do we think? Like how many wins would we need to get our projected standing for the Magic? So if you're okay with this, G, I'll start on this one, and then you can come in. So. We're obviously 38 and 31, so it's big 13 games that's coming up. Having a little bit of a stats dive, which I think is more your game than mine. Last year, you had to have, if you wanted the 6th seed, which is where I see Orlando targeting, 44 wins. The year before that, 23-24, you were 47 wins, and 22-23, you were 45 wins. So that's the last 3 years of the playoffs to be 6th. So we're going to use that as like the benchmark. So I'm going to say maybe Orlando needs to be hitting 46 wins. I think round about that to have a fair shot. If we get 46 wins and don't get in, I'm going to assume we've lost a tiebreaker to Atlanta. That's the way I'm going to see that. So to get 46 wins, we're going to need 8 wins out of 13, which I think is doable.
Yeah.
It is doable, despite injuries. I've got the East set out like this. So, unfortunately, Cade Cunningham, and I'm going to wish him really well because
absolutely,
I like Cade Cunningham. I actually quite like what the Pistons are doing, as well as a team and some of the players they've got. Not a big fan of their announcer in the arena, but I've said that before. But everything else about them I like. I think with the return of Tatum and the way he has returned, I could see Boston perhaps leapfrogging to the top of the East as the 1 seed. I could see New York potentially. They're not doing great, but I could see New York sliding into 2. I think the Cade Cunningham loss will really affect Detroit, so I could see Detroit slipping.
So they're 5.5 games, just for argument's sake. The Knicks behind the Pistons.
They are,
at the
but
moment.
I think it could be that big of a loss with Cade. That's where I'm at with that. I see Cleveland in 4th, Toronto in 5th, which is a testament to their coaching with the players they've got and how they've pulled this back. I think it's going to be really tight between us and Atlanta. I've got us because I'm being good to Orlando, obviously, is 6th, Atlanta 7th. But if it's a tiebreaker, we're out already. Charlotte in 8th, Miami in 9th, Philly in 10th.
Okay.
That's where I've got it. And I think the worry is whether Atlanta or us. or matchups. Because
Well, in terms of the tie breaks there, obviously the teams in and around us, you mentioned the Hawks. We're down 0-3 with 1 to play. The Raptors, we are 1-1 with 1 to play. So that game, I think, is it a week Sunday or something? That's going to be massive. We've got the Hornets already beaten us 3-1. We've obviously got the tiebreaker over the Heat. And I don't recall how we're doing against the Sixers, but it's hopefully we don't have to worry about the Philadelphia 76ers. So in terms of predicting it, like Paul asked, I've got the Celtics in 1, much like yourself. Pistons 2, Knicks 3. I think there's just too much a gap with so little time left. Cavs 4. So I went through the Magic, Raptors, Hornets, Hawks, Heat and Sixers schedules and started dialing up what I thought. So I've got the Magic finishing 46 and 36. So I think that was 8. What did we say? 8 and 5 to finish, which we said wasn't too
that's right,
too much of a stretch. I've got the Raptors at 45 and 37 in 6, so only one game, and that's how important that one game is next week. The Hornets I've got in 44 and 38. I have then in 8-9 the Hawks and the Heat, and they're tied at 43-39. I didn't see who had the tiebreaker there. And then I had the Sixers in 10 with 42 and 40. So fingers crossed it'll be 5th. They did say on the Magic Cavs telecast, didn't they, that it was the most likely 4-5 matchup was Cleveland Orlando. So I'm going to hold them to that. That would mean no playing. But we cannot drop any lower than 6. If you have to face the Hornets or the Hawks in the play-in, it's just going to be not good for our health.
Right, well, I can't disagree with that. I wouldn't want to play either of them in the play-in, but we've got Angus, who kind of fits on with the questions that have came in, and I'm thanking everybody who's come into the mailbag here. And Angus has a roll of questions he wants to ask us. But Angus says, if we therefore look at the season so far, were the expectations for the team too high, or is the team where it should be? And if we were fully fit, where would we be? So, like, if you're adding Franz, for example, into this, Anthony Black, etc., where would we be? So, I don't know if you want to start with that one.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I don't think the expectations were too high. You're looking at the Pistons at the moment, who won 50 and 19. I kind of expected us to be a little bit like them with a fully healthy roster. We're not that far behind. I mean, it's 12 wins in the win column, which isn't insurmountable in terms of how we've been playing. You add Franz in, you add Black in, you have a bit more luck on the injury front. It's a tough one. So expectations too high at the start of the season? I don't think they were. I think they need to be high, seeing as how the team has grown. And it's where we should be aiming for, which was a home court advantage in the first round. So it is a little bit disappointing where we're at, but given all the injuries, they're fighting hard. We're 7 games above 500 at the moment. And, by our projections, I had 46 when you, Gary, probably in around just 45 or 46.
Right now, I've got us at 46, but if you'd asked me before a ball was tipped this season, I'd said I thought we'd get over 50 wins with the team. I think looking at it and reflecting and seeing almost the settling in period, maybe like it was a little bit high to say would win the East, but I had us in the top 2 at the East and going on a run maybe to the finals because of what I think of the East. And also I didn't expect Boston to do what they've done with the injury to Tatum. So my expectations probably were too high. But by the same token, I think if you were to have a fully fit Magic team, I do think it's not beyond the realms of possibility or probability that we would be looking at home court. Like, I think we would be probably on a similar record, slightly better than what Cleveland's got now, if we were fully fit. And Angus has asked, and I'm just rolling on with these questions because it's going to.
So before you go on to the next part, though,
Yeah.
obviously we had it in our heads we were having the same Magic team as last season with the defense as it was.
Yeah.
The defense has obviously slipped. We were getting new coaches in, ex NBA champions. So we thought we were getting,
Oh yeah,
the works. So obviously something slipped somewhere. You've obviously got the injuries. So in terms of where we're at the moment compared to what's actually occurred this season, if we were a little better than we were, I'd probably be content. I'm probably a little bit disappointed at the moment, but that's how I'd probably round it off, Gar.
I totally understand that. I think it's a fair point. I do think, and I'm not going to give too much away, but I do think it's how we end now is massive for this. Like Angus has asked, and I'm going to say this because it does link into where we're at, but he's asked with another player, and that's obviously Wendell with like this contusion bruise on his ribs, out with an injury. Do we have to look at our conditioning coaches? So I'm going to say a little bit on this, G, and then jump on.
It's your field, mate.
I honestly think that yes, we're injured, and I'm worried about the key injuries we've got. So my worry is it's like the injuries we've had to Paolo, Franz, etc. And then I was like, right, maybe I need to step back here. Maybe I need to stop reacting with emotion because I know I've had rants like in previous years about injuries. Am I fully accurate? So I was looking at this, and Wendell with a contusion, he's basically got bruised ribs. Like that's essentially what it sounds like he's got. So if that's the case, he shouldn't be out forever. That's how I'm looking at it. I don't know how bad the bruising is, but he shouldn't be out forever. I don't think there was any way that Franz Wagner was missing that game in Germany. I think if we'd held him out of that game, I honestly think we would have unsettled him and more. Like with that, I think so. It's like, even though it wasn't wise to play him, and I definitely don't think he should have played in London, I don't think that was ever on the table. However, I don't think we are as injured as we were. And I'm not saying we're like a fit and healthy team, but if you look at the really injured teams, and it's a bad measuring stick to have, we're not New Orleans. We're not what Charlotte's had. We're not what Memphis has had. We're not what Philly's had. And I think in the last couple of years, they've been the most injured teams. However, my worry is that we've got this great medical facilities and we've got the key players are very injured, and I'm more worried about how Paolo came into the season. The Paolo we're seeing now is Paolo. That's him. Like post All-Star break, whatever he's done, he's different. He looks more like the P5 that we all know and love. And, I think also tip of the hat to him for coming out and calling himself out and saying, you know what, I wasn't an All-Star. And I was like, I already had a high opinion of you, but it's even higher now for saying that. But I do think that the questions are more about the key injuries rather than we have everyone injured always, because I think we've carried injured players on the team like GI who missed large slots of time anyway. I don't think we're as injured as we were, but I do think the key injuries are a big one. I am going to say one more thing, but I do also think we need to give a break to Mo Wagner, because I've noticed a little bit of questioning of Mo Wagner. And I was talking to Mikey this morning about this on the way to work. We gave each other a call. There was no way that Mo Wagner was going to come back to slot into this season as people might have expected him to do. I've had bad sports injuries before. You don't just come back from it. So I think the Mo Wagner we're seeing now needs time and patience. We might not have the depth to cover that up with what's on our bench, as you said already, but there's a lot going into this, both physically and psychologically, to get that Mo Wagner back. And I think it could be with a pre-season behind him. So that's where I'm at with it. Yes, we are injured. Yes, there's questions to be asked, but I don't think we're as injured as we once were.
No, that's fair, mate. That is fair. In terms of Wendell, now I was a little disappointed when he didn't suit up yesterday because I thought that Charlotte game was one of the most important games. Obviously, maybe try and derail their little, run to try and get back in.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he didn't play. Goga, I thought Goga did okay, but then I looked at the stats, and the stats didn't say that.
No,
But
definitely.
he has not played since he's been with the Magic more than 68 games in a season. Now, this season so far, he's played 65, so he's on course, to potentially play 78 or so if he comes back and plays them all. But prior to that, 68, 55, 57, 61, 55. That's quite injured.
Have you got his Chicago stats there?
So first season, 44 games. Second season, 43 games. And third season, when he was traded, it was a total. It was 54 between the Magic and the Bulls. So, 50, 60% in that range somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't great for someone if you want to have continuity with your starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's potentially a reason, we've all, when we did that on the last episode, when we did about protecting players,
Mm-hmm.
that's why we left Carter alone,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. So my little notes on this section, and you've mentioned the best facilities as well, and that was my first point as well. If we've got the best facilities, we should be looking after players a lot better. They've got all the sports science, but to have the injuries we've had in the last 6 or 7 seasons, Jonathan Isaac multiple times, Markel Fultz multiple times, and just shout out Markel Fultz for his game-winning layup on Thursday night for the Raptors G League team.
Trading G to the Raptors pod.
No, you're not. No, you're not. We'll bring Markel back. Banchero, Franz, Mo, Suggs is often on the floor, on the bench. Now Anthony Black. When will it stop? It just feels like we're cursed. But it's not just us, like you said, Gar. There's other teams, and I just thought of, if I just name some of key players who are, not playing. Obviously, Kyrie, Anthony Davis, Jimmy Butler, Tyrese Halliburton, Bradley Beal, Giannis has been out, Jalen Williams for OKC, Embiid, Maxey, Anthony Edwards just gone down, Dylan Brooks hurt himself against us, Lillard's out for the season, Sabonis is out for the season, Levine, Jaren Jackson, Walker Kessler. The list goes on. And it does raise the question of, is the season too long?
It raises the question, is the season too long? And it also raises the question about the stresses that athletes put themselves under today, because the trend of players playing every game, it carries over into like football. I'm talking like Premier League, like proper football, not the NFL type of thing. Because that's not football, right? But like, again, with injuries and players, if you went back, typically you would expect players to be playing 70 plus games in an NBA season. Typically you could have in like a football season a squad of 18 players rather than what you're seeing now. You would see players playing every minute and stuff. So the fitness, the demands, I guess things like the explosiveness in athletes being able to do things now that they wouldn't have done before. Like look at LeBron James playing at 41 years old at the level he can play at, and the athleticism. Sports science has come a long way, but there is a trade-off for sports science, and it's on ligaments and muscles and joints and stuff. And I think that we're seeing that. It's a very different build, a different body on an NBA player then to now. Yeah. I think it's a faster NBA now, but it's not as physical an NBA now.
Yeah.
Would be my take on that. But I do think maybe if you think about like how that wear and tear on the body, you are going to get more strains.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that is shown. So I don't know if it's maybe a longer season or too many games, but it's a case of how we play those games now.
Yeah.
So just keep going with the mailbag. Angus was on a roll here, and he's asked how many wins does Coach Mosley need to avoid the sack at the end of the season, G?
No, well, we didn't think that, he would get management came out, didn't they, and said he's safe until the end of the season. We didn't expect that. And with that, though, at least it's sort of quietened down, Mosley needs to go, which has been pretty good in fairness. And, he's come a long way, especially with that 7-game win streak to, trying to convince a lot of people that he is the right man for the job. But you touched upon it earlier. It's not what he does this season. You've got 13 games to go. He could win all 13. I don't think that's going to make a blind bit of difference. It's all going to hinge now on the first round and what he does tactically against whoever the opponent is. So, we mentioned earlier about how we think we're going to finish 46-36, going 8-5 rest of the way. But I do think he's walking the plank at the moment. And only he can stop that by trying to get the absolute, and I'm not saying he's not trying. And he's busting a gut. You listen to his interviews, he's having sleepless nights. He's trying everything. He's trying different things. And as I mentioned earlier, it was nice to see his aggression and see him get booted out of that game last night. And it wasn't on him; it was on the players. And good to see that he actually cares. We know that he does care, but it's ultimately going to fall on what he does this postseason, and the first round series is going to go a long way to deciding his fate, I believe. How about you, mate?
Yeah, I think with Moores, if we hit the play-in, he's got a real problem. I think if we're in the play-in, it's a real problem because we all know that was not the aim of this season. I think everybody knows that. But I do ultimately think that it's going to be the actual playoff performance that dictates it. So a first round exit's probably not going to cut it. So I think if we went out in the second round, but it was plucky, he might have a shot. But I think if he did play in first round, he's gone.
Great.
And it brings me to Sean. I feel as though these have all kind of got together to ask these questions that flow, even though
they've been in a pub, haven't they? And they thought, right, what can we send the boys?
Everybody but Raul Bacor, who we know couldn't get to there, being based in South America, but obviously the rest. But Sean's asked, and again, thank you for this, and it's his buzzer beater. What's our best matchup in the playoff from the current top four? And what's the optimistic but realistic ending to the season for us? For me, G, I've kind of alluded to that already. I think the optimistic, realistic end of the season is probably a 4-3 defeat in the second round. I do think if we're fit, a really good Sean in the second round is both realistic without being overly optimistic. I think given the injury to Cade Cunningham, I think everybody would say Detroit. When you remove Cade as the ideal matchup in the first round, if it was a case of just based on the overall season, I wouldn't mind seeing us in Cleveland in the first round again. But I think Boston's the team to worry about out of those four with Cade out. But yeah, I think anyone would think minus Cade, it's got to be Detroit.
Yeah. So my two, I've got Detroit.
Yeah.
Same reasons you had, but I've also got Boston.
Right.
Now, I know Boston have had a fantastic season, and their culture has really, really shone through. Losing Porzingis, losing Horford. Who else did they lose? I can't remember.
Tatum was out for a long.
Tatum, yeah, Tatum was out. But then they lost Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose they've got Vucevic now, which doesn't help. But in fairness, they've brought people in, and you can see that they're trying. They're really, really trying. They've all adopted this Boston culture, which is awful, but it's a winning culture, and it's working. Nobody had them down to be second in the East, let alone first at the beginning of the season. They've obviously had a shot in the arm now, having Tatum back. Vucevic is also a really good addition for them at the deadline for Anthony Simons, so he gives them that post threat. But what we did against them last year, with a healthy roster, they didn't like it. They didn't like it up, Gar. Did they?
I feel like I'm on Dad's Army here, and people in the UK will get that. The problem is,
Corporal Jones, mate.
Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. The problem is we aren't going to be healthy, because I don't think we're going to have a healthy Mo. And you've also got to factor in, is Fran's going to come back ready? Like, we've seen what Tatum's doing now, but even that could be adrenaline based.
That's true.
Now, Boston's been able to do it without Tatum, and I just worry a little bit about where our depth will lead us there. There's a lot of questions to be asked. Boston worry me. Do worry me, given what they've been able to do. But happy St. Patrick's Day to anyone out there of a Boston persuasion this week. Thank you for listening to our pod. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I just want to have another crack at them. I dislike the Celtics a lot, and I think we could put a better show in than last year. But yeah, no, you make good valid points about France and that and Mo. You've also touched upon Detroit. Now, the reason I don't want to play the Cavaliers, we obviously played them 2 weeks ago, and I thought we were fantastic. We were really, really good. But they came back right at us at the end. They couldn't miss, and I can just see us having a series with them where they don't miss. You've got Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, and they dominate our bigs. They really, really do. You add James Harden into the mix, foul baiting. Mitchell, he gets what he wants. I think it just could be a very long, painful first round against them. So that's the reason I'd want to avoid the Cavaliers. But could we beat them? This is the NBA. You could win against anyone on any day, couldn't you? But in terms of being optimistic and realistic, if you can get to the second round and take someone far, fantastic. And a successful season now would be getting into the second round and getting a bit of experience.
You never know, G. Your Raptors might get up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Right, I don't know if we've got any more key points, but I know we've got the Lakers coming up. I'm guessing you're eating red meat all day for that one, G.
Yeah, I've been winding my mate Simon in work up, who's a Laker fan. I was actually hoping that they were playing the Heat tonight and not last night, so they'd be on a back-to-back. Unfortunately, they're not. But with Doncic, doing the heavy lifting last night against the Heat, we thank him for his efforts. Let's hope that LeBron needs to rest his weary legs tomorrow, and we can catch him and get a W that we really, really need.
Well, he is hoping to that, and he is hoping that the people out there pick up the swag that's available in the Kia Centre, which is looking pretty smart.
That's pretty smart, isn't it?
Yeah, I had a feeling that you might be like tapping people up to try and get you some of that merch, G.
Yeah, well, Neil's going out. Is it next week? What's your favourite design out of the lot of them? I think everybody.
That's the connoisseur's choice. That.
Yeah, there's a T-shirt with stuff sort of on a surfboard.
I've seen a baseball cap that looked pretty good as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there we go.
If I do go out for the playoffs, mate, and there's still stock available, I'm sure I'll try and bring you something back.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it could be gone by then, but
yeah, probably.
But there we go. But I don't think we've got any more for anymore. But not for the time being. But I would like to thank anyone who's listening to this. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Give us a like. Comment. It might boost it onto some people's algorithms. If you've submitted to the mailbag again, that's appreciated. You've helped the pod massively. From all of us here at Orlando UK, go Magic, and let's get the wins that get us out of the play-in and into the playoffs. Thanks for listening.
Hoop shots at lightning speed.